Hey guys, in this video I am going to be explaining some of the top tips, some of the cheats, some of the hacks that I personally use in my property investing business to maximize opportunities that are presented to me by vendors. Permitted development is a massive field. It's huge. It overlaps with planning permission, it overlaps with building regulations. But in this video, I'm going to be talking you through the main areas that I've utilized in actual developments that I've done myself. In fact, I'm in one now. I found a quiet corner. You might notice the backdrop's a little bit different, of a development that we have just been finishing off actually. It's a 7-bedroom, 7-bathroom holiday let, just about to go live. We're just doing the furnishing and getting the final touches on it before we start letting it out. So let me use this as an example, and I'll do a tour of it in another video. But in this exact property, it was a 3-bedroom bungalow that we extended massively, but we extended it under permitted development largely. So we did four main things to it. We added dormer windows to the front and back. We extended the ground floor backwards, and we added a balcony on top of it so that the new bedrooms upstairs had balconies looking out over the sea. It's a beach house. It's got 5 miles of beach basically at the end of the back garden. Now, of those 4 things, it's very interesting to think what needs planning permission and what needs permitted development. So firstly, putting a dormer onto the back of a house, that's where you take the original roof line and you build a right-angled additional space on that, so you've got a vertical wall, you've got a flat roof. You can't go above the normal ridge line, so you can't go above the apex of the roof, but you can go backwards nearly as far as the back of the building, so you can actually do that quite a large way. You can do that on the back of a building with no planning permission, so long as you stay within 50 cubic meters. Sometimes it's 40 cubic meters for terrace properties. On the front of the building, we did the same, but we did very large ones front and back. So we needed planning permission for the front and we needed planning permission for the back. But that actually added the equivalent of 4 bedrooms. Now we did 1 huge bedroom on one side and we did 2 separate bedrooms on the other side. So it added 3 bedrooms in total to what was a 3-bedroom property. The 4-meter extension to the rear of the property, now that was massive. The property's 12 meters wide. The 4-meter extension towards the sea, we put huge bifold doors, huge sliding doors on the rear of the property, so it's all glass looking out to sea, looking out to the beach. That required no planning permission at all. That's covered under permitted development. You can take a ground floor extension out for up to 4 meters without asking anyone's permission. So we did that, and then, believe it or not, we needed planning permission to put a glass balustrade around the top and to make it a balcony, to make it a decked area to walk out from the upstairs bedrooms. Now the planners, this is very interesting, and this is where knowing the law is really important and having a great architect is really important. The planners, they were inclined to decline our application based on the fact that we had extended towards the sea, and there's coastal erosion. I'm in Yorkshire, there's coastal erosion on the East Yorkshire coast, and they said we're not granting any planning permissions that extend buildings towards the sea. But we countered that with, or rather my architect countered it with, we're not asking your permission to extend towards the sea. We've already extended under permitted development. We are asking your permission to put some glass on top of the extension to turn it into a balcony. And because of that, they then granted our planning permission. So there's 4 uses of permitted development that are quite interesting, where some weren't permitted development. We had to apply for planning permission, so the dormer windows, for example, the balcony, but the actual one that they would have declined, we didn't have to ask, and that's why we did 4 meters. If we'd gone for 5 meters, they would have turned us down. 4.1 meters, they would have turned us down, but because we went 4 meters, we didn't have to ask any permission. There was actually a 5th. We wanted to put a nice decked area, raised decked area for the ground floor lounge. So we've got kitchen diners downstairs and they open out onto beautiful decking looking out to sea. Now because that decking was 0.8 meters high, so it's just the ground, the floor level inside the house is actually 0.8 meters, so just under a meter above the lawn level. The decking had to stay at that level, otherwise you would have had steps down, it wouldn't have been as nice. We actually had to ask planning permission to put some decking in. It's remarkable, but if that had been lower, if that had been say 20 centimeters, we wouldn't have had to ask permission. And if they declined our planning permission, we could have done steps down from the lounge down onto the decking and had it at a lower level. So it's really worth knowing what your rights are under permitted development. So let me talk you through a few cheats that I have in my head the whole time when I'm meeting with vendors, when I'm meeting with potential developers or potential JV partners, where I'm thinking to myself, oh, I know I can do that without asking permission, or I know I can do this with my permitted development rights. So these are my 9 tips, if you like, for permitted development. So the first one I've already mentioned, you can extend backwards by up to 4 meters. So long as the rear boundary isn't too close, so you can't go within a certain distance of a rear boundary. Now you might be asking me, oh Frank, do you not know how close to the rear boundary? I'm not an architect, guys, I'm not a planning consultant. We are generalists. As sophisticated property investors, we are generalists. So what we have to have is a good idea of all of these rules, building regulations, planning permission, precedents, permitted development rights, etc. But then we need to go to our experts. Once we've got a deal agreed in principle, we need to go to our power team and have them ratify it, have them check the fine details, and they come up with additional opportunities, or they come up with obstacles that we then have to overcome. But these are my 9 top tips. So first one is that you can go backwards up to 4 meters on the ground floor. Now interestingly for me, that was towards the sea, which was fantastic. You can extend sideways by 50% of the property's width. So if you've got a, in this instance, 12 meter wide house, you can extend 6 meters sideways under permitted development. That's a small house that you can actually add on to a property. Now, you would need planning permission to actually split it off and turn it into another house, but you wouldn't need planning permission to do the development. And then once the development's there and it's all built and you're using it, you of course can then put in for planning permission to split the property. And I've done that successfully on a number of developments, because who's going to object reasonably to a different residential use within a property? It's the development of the property that people object to. The third one I've mentioned already, you can put a rear dormer onto a property. Now this can add best part of another bedroom, or certainly allow 1 bedroom to become 2. You can add a dormer so long as it's beneath 50 cubic meters to the rear of a property without seeking any kind of planning permission under permitted development. Permitted development is available on every property in the country unless it's been taken away. Now this is very, very important, because it can be taken away in a number of ways. So let me give you a few things to watch out for. Now all of these are listed on a local council's website. It's well worth you jumping on the local borough website, the local council website, putting in the address and just seeing if any of these pop up, because it's a warning that you're going to have lost some of your permitted development rights. So for example, SSSI sites of special scientific interest. You've often given up a lot of your permitted development rights and you can't do what I'm talking about. World Heritage sites. So one of my properties is in a World Heritage site, and that means loads of things. I couldn't even put UPVC windows in the front of the property without asking for planning permission. I couldn't put a swimming pool in the back garden without asking for planning permission. So you lose a lot of your rights in a World Heritage site. A conservation area, an Article 4 area. Now, Article 4 is where a council has applied and been granted permission to take away a specific permitted development right. Most people are familiar with Article 4 in property circles because it's been used extensively across the country by university town councils to stop the proliferation of houses of multiple occupation. So that's HMOs, where in certain cities there are whole streets of just student accommodation where there used to be lovely 3-story properties with families living in them. Now they've all got 5, 6, 7 students in them, because what you could do previously prior to Article 4 coming in that city is you could take a normal house and you could split it into multiple bedrooms and let it to groups of students or groups of individuals. And so what that Article 4 directive does is it takes away that permitted development. So now, in the same place where there's loads of HMOs, if you want to take a single house and turn it into a HMO, you can't without requesting planning permission. And of course, often those planning permissions will be declined. So you need to know if there's an Article 4 directive in your local area. And Article 4 isn't just for HMOs, it can be for multiple different permitted development rights. An Article 2 area is like a national park. Often you can't do a lot of the permitted development in a national park, so be aware of Article 2 areas. And of course, individual buildings can be listed. If you have a grade 1, grade 2, even a grade star listed building, grade 1 star listed building, for example, then often your permitted development rights have all been taken away or largely taken away. So just watch out for that. That's my 4th tip. My 5th tip is if your building was built between 1948 and 2018, so you've got a decent chunk of time there where you can have had your building built, you now have a massive amount of additional permitted development rights. A single story building can add 1 story to become 2 stories. Under permitted development, this is unbelievable. The golden rule used to be you can't go up any higher than the original roof line. So you'd have a row of houses coming along and a row of houses coming along, and there was no way you could build your house up higher. You'd never get planning permission for it. Now you can do that without even asking permission. Unbelievable. Now there's certain caveats. You have to put in a prior notification notice. You have to get a certificate of lawful development, but you don't have to ask for planning permission. And of course, if you're going to buy a bungalow and you know about this and no one else does, then that's fantastic. You've got a competitive advantage. You can actually pay a little bit more than everyone else and make a brilliant profit on the development. If you've already got a house with 2 stories, you can actually add 2 more stories. Now in high pounds per square metre areas, this is fantastic. If you've got high GDV, gross development value per square metre, that ability to convert 2-story properties into 4-story properties is amazing. Now it doesn't mean you can then subdivide them and turn them into 4 flats. You'd need planning permission for that, but it does mean you can do all the works, change the exterior of the building, and then subdivide them later. Amazingly lax rules, and I think a brilliant opportunity for us as property investors to spot these opportunities before it becomes common knowledge. These have only come in very, very recently. We had a host of these come in September 2020, if memory serves me, and some of them are only becoming the planning class use classes. So the what used to be the retail and residential, so the C3 planning class for residential, the A1, A2, A3 for retail, etc. Those are all changing as well in this summer 2021. So it's well worth paying attention to this, because these things that are brand new and cutting edge today will become old hat in 2-3 years time. But the thing is, we'll make a lot of money and do a lot of deals whilst everyone else is playing catch up. So that was number 5. Be aware of the new permitted development rules and that they're coming in, etc. Class Q is number 6. Now, not many people even know what Class Q is, but in a nutshell, if you have a farm with agricultural buildings on it, you can convert those agricultural buildings to dwellings, into homes, without asking anyone's permission, under permitted development. Now you can't extend them upwards, you can't extend them outwards or to the rear, but what you can do is turn that building into a home. Unbelievable. And we made an offer on a farm. It was a chicken farm and it had 5 really good sized chicken sheds. They weren't high, but they were quite wide, quite long. We didn't win the bid. There was a few other interested parties, and an ice cream maker actually outbid us by quite a considerable amount. And our offer was based entirely around the fact that we were going to dismantle the farm. We weren't going to use it as a farm, but we were going to turn the 5 chicken sheds into 5 beautiful luxury bungalows. And of course, they were all spread out over this farm. They had lovely rolling fields. We were going to subdivide the farm up into nice plots. They'd each have a couple of acres, and they'd be beautiful, state-of-the-art bungalows that were within the dimensions of the previous chicken sheds. I spoke to the vendors, I booked an appointment to go out with them, but before I went to see them, I spoke to my architect and said, I think this is the case, can you check? He read up on it, he came back to me and said, yes Frank, it is the case, you can crack on. So there's a couple of rules around it. They had to have been agricultural buildings in 2013, so you can't just create a shed now and then turn it into a house. You know, the rules are designed to prevent abuse, but that was a bona fide farm. Those chicken sheds have been there for years. Number 7 is that prior approval is sometimes required. So please don't run out there and crack on and convert a property or extend it upwards or whatever without checking with an architect. They will tell you if prior approval is required. And that's just where you go to the local council and you say, I'm about to do this under permitted development rights. Please confirm that you're in agreement. And that's good because they will give you what's called a lawful development certificate. And that lawful development certificate is your reassurance that yes, this is allowed. It's the same as a planning permission. And when you come to sell the property, the conveyancers will ask for that. Number 8 is that building regulations still apply. So it's really important that any development you do under permitted development, you still need building regulations approval. For example, if you're creating new bedrooms, if you're generally moving internal walls, if you're doing any kind of structural work, just check. Building regulations are such a nice group of people because it's not subjective. They just have a rule book and they're there to help you to follow the rule book. They'll come out at the start of a development and you can show them your plans. They'll tell you, they'll give you advice. It's a bit like HMRC. HMRC, any question you ask them, they have to help you. They have to actually help you to work out how much tax you owe them, and so you can use them as a free resource. It's the same with building regulations, building control. So you can chat to them, you can ask their opinion, you can ask them what they need, what they don't need, and then as you do the development, they'll pop out at certain junctures and check that what you've done is up to scratch, and then they'll give you your building regulations sign off at the end, which is a certificate again. So please be aware, if you're doing permitted development, it doesn't mean the rule book goes out the window. And finally, if you do something on under permitted development and it turns out you've made a mistake and you should have asked for planning permission, that is not necessarily the end of the world. You can still apply for retrospective planning permission. Now, I wouldn't use this as a strategy, but you can do a development and then say, please can I have planning permission for what I've just done. The danger is you don't get given planning permission, and the absolute sanction, the worst case scenario, is you have to undo what you've done. So you don't want to do this lightheartedly, but you do have that option. It's not like you're suddenly criminally liable because you've done some development that you should have done. The worst case scenario is that you have to retrospectively apply for planning permission. I have heard from people who have done this, come unstuck, really got worried, and then realized that actually all they have to do is apply for planning. The planners have been very reasonable in the stories and cases that I've heard, and have actually granted planning permission. So those are my 9 top tips for permitted development, guys. It's a fascinating subject. It's an area where you can make a deal that no one else can make because you're aware of what you can do with the property and what you can't do with the property. If you've got any questions at all, don't hesitate to ask us. We'll always help you with the deal if we can. If you take a look at the notes with this video, you'll see there's a PowerPoint to accompany it with all of the facts and figures that I've given you, because I know that it's quite a detailed subject. And I've also got a document created by my architect about the changes in use classes, so that A1, A2, A3 for retail, and the C1, C2, C3, etc. for planning class uses for domestic and dwelling houses. So if you would like to take a look at those, feel free, you can download those free of charge. Guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button, click the notification bell, and I'll see you at our next episode. Until then, happy investing.